Okay, so till now we have been discussing an important function called the stream function, right? It's a scalar function. So this is a scalar function, okay? And it is valid under certain conditions. Under certain conditions, you are able to define the stream function, and this plays a very, very important role in fluid mechanics. Similar to stream functions, there is another function phi, which we call the potential function. These two functions are not the same, they are different, and we'll see the definition for the potential function in a second. But they can be related to each other. They are, well, in a sense, they play a very, very important role when these two functions are mixed up together. We'll see how that comes about. But for the time being, phi is another scalar potential function. Okay. So where does this come about? Let us consider irrotational flows. How do we define irrotational flows? Do you remember? The curl of the velocity field is equal to 0. Right? I have put a hat over this because the 0 is also the 0 vector. Where is this equation valid? In an irrotational flow, this equation is valid everywhere, at every point. Right? So this has to be satisfied at every point. Consider that I am able to write my velocity vector as a gradient of some potential function. Okay. Let's say this is allowed, which means that I can write my ux I hat plus uy j hat plus k hat as some d phi dx I hat plus d phi dy j hat plus d phi dz k hat. That is my ux equal to some del phi del x, my ux equal to del phi del x, uy equal to some the scalar function partial derivative with y. Similarly for z. So let's say that there exists such a potential function. Okay. Then consider that this is true. Then what happens to the vorticity? Vorticity now is this. Okay. And what is this? This is equal to 0. This is 0 due to vector identity. Right. So if it is possible to write my velocity field in this particular form as a gradient of a scalar quantity, then it automatically satisfies my irrotationality condition. Okay. So we'll see that this function comes up for so this obviously gives you the hint that this is an important function when it comes to irrotational flows, right? Okay, good. So far so good. So consider a steady, incompressible, irrotational flow. Okay. This is irrotational flow. Then what happens to my continuity? My continuity requirement is this. Okay, this is continuity. which automatically tells me that phi, I'll replace u with my gradient of this phi. This is 0, which means this is 0. This equation, okay, basically, which is this equation, okay. This equation is also called the Laplace's equation. This is a very, very important equation in engineering and physics because it comes up in many, many different places. And if you know how to solve this equation, if you have read about how to solve the Laplace's equation in any one context, then you know how to solve the Laplace's equation in other contexts as well. So this comes up in fluid mechanics, it comes up in elasticity, it will also come up in electrodynamics. So this is a very, very important equation. Okay. So this particular equation, the Laplace's equation, the solution to that turns out to be very important, probably for a case where you have a steady, incompressible, irrotational flow. Okay. So this situation is something that interests us quite a bit. This is the reason we are going to later on add two-dimensional flows also. So then life will become easier for us. But the way we have defined the potential function, okay. Now note that phi can be defined for 3D flows. Unlike psi, the stream function. Okay. So the two are both scalar functions. They are very important in two different cases, and they are not the same. Phi can be defined for irrotational flows, but 3D flows, whereas this stream function we have already seen where it is applicable, right? Okay, let's see. A couple of more things. So we are going to look at, okay, we will be interested in 2D cases, and we will see in a second why we are interested in 2D cases. We are interested in 2D cases, and in 2D cases basically you have the function phi such that it will have to satisfy this equation. Right? And sorry, what have I done? This is phi. So this equation is also called, once this phi is a real valued function such that this is satisfied, and phi functions that satisfy this equation are also called harmonic functions. Okay, let's see what else. Yeah. Okay, let's get rid of this. Yeah, right. So, incompressible, let me just, incompressible potential flows, right. So, incompressible potential flows are also sometimes called ideal flows. And we will see why these are called ideal flows, but this is a very important situation where we have incompressible potential flows. And the next thing was that, yeah, so this is a linear PDE. Okay, so if phi 1 satisfies the Laplace's equation, okay. So let's say phi 1 is a solution of this equation, and let's say phi 2 is also satisfies then it's rather straightforward to determine that the superposition of the two also satisfies the Laplace's equation. It's rather interesting, right? We saw this before too, because the stream function is also a harmonic function. But what is the relationship between phi and psi? So let us consider different streamlines such that you have one is psi 1, another is psi 2, another is psi 3, and let's say that you have lines of constant phi given as phi 1, phi 2, phi 3. The question is there any relationship between the lines of constant phi and lines of constant psi? So if you have lines of constant psi, then my del psi dot dx needs to be 0, right? So we have already done this before, right? So del psi was del psi by del x I hat plus del psi by del y j hat dot, j hat is inside the bracket dotted with the dx vector. So this is I hat dx plus j hat dy, and this is supposed to be equal to 0, which means that you have del psi del x dx plus del psi del y dy is equal to 0, which means my dy by dx is nothing but d psi by dx by, there's a minus sign, del psi by. So this quantity is what? We already know this. This is ui. ui by ux, right? So lines of constant psi are such that dy by dx for them is ui by ux. What happens for lines of constant phi? Okay, I'm just going to take this out. Okay. So lines of constant phi will be lines such that phi dot some dx is equal to 0, which basically I'm going to have to write the same thing. So you will end up with the same equation, right? So I'm sort of skipping here. Right? Which means my dy by dx, again just like last time, is minus del phi by del y by del x, by del phi by del y. But what are these two quantities? This is by definition ux and this is by definition uy. Okay. So now you see dy by dx for psi equal to constant multiplied by just the numerical value, okay, this is not some vector multiplication, into dy by dx for phi equal to constant is equal to minus 1, right? If I multiply these two, I get minus 1. When do you get that? You get when these two lines are perpendicular to each other, which means the answer to this is that if these are my lines of psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, then my lines, okay, it's not 90 degrees, so sorry, but this was meant to be 90 degrees. So all these angles, okay, this is phi 1, this is phi 2, this is phi 3. So equipotential lines and equi-stream function lines, these are lines such that they intersect at 90 degrees. Okay. So you can already see that there is some relationship. Obviously, this picture is only true for two-dimensional system flows where both phi and psi exist, right? So both of them will have to exist. Otherwise, you cannot be writing or doing any of this. But when they do exist, when the two simultaneously do exist, then this is true. Okay. Okay, let me see what else. Okay, so now we are going to come into the realm of complex functions, and I hope you remember complex numbers well. So we will be defining, I'm going to give you a sneak preview. We will be defining a function f such that this f is going to be equal to phi xy plus I times psi xy. Okay. Before we do this, we'll just take a quick recap of complex numbers. So complex numbers are numbers such that, let's say z is a complex number, then it can be represented as x plus iy, where x and y are both real quantities, right? Or in polar form, it can be written as r e to the power I theta, where theta is some angle between 2 pi and 0, and r is a real number again, and theta is obviously again a real number. So this can alternately also be written as r cosine theta plus I times sine theta. This is any arbitrary complex number. The complex conjugate of z is often written as z bar. Now this is going to be a little bit of a problem because bar we have reserved for vectors, but where possible here we are not, hopefully if we come to a situation like that we'll clarify, but wherever we are dealing with complex numbers, the bar is going to deal with or denote complex conjugate. The complex conjugate of any complex number is another number as x minus iy. Now the magnitude of z minus z square is often written as z into z bar, which is nothing but x square plus y square, or simply r square if you are to write this in this particular form. Okay, let's see. Now there are a few important theorems with regards to complex numbers that are relevant here. And for this part, I'm going to refer to this particular book if you want to get this. Or this is just, this portion can be found in any text that deals with elementary complex analysis. But we are not going to go too deep into complex analysis, but we still want to discuss some very, very basic issues, okay, of complex numbers. So now let's say there is a complex valued function fz. Okay. Then this complex valued function, and here I am referring from a definition, a complex valued function fz is said to be analytic. Okay. You can write this down. I'll write it also. Okay. So a complex valued function fz is said to be analytic on an open set G if it has a derivative at every point in G. If it has a derivative at every point in G. Okay, this is the definition. The definition of an analytic function. So basically, an analytic function talks about an open set. So analytic function doesn't talk about analyticity just at a point, but rather analyticity in an open set. Sometimes they do use terms like fz is analytic at z0, which means that it is analytic in a open set around z0. Okay. So a complex function is called analytic if it has a derivative. Derivative means df dz. Okay. So good. Okay. So now so if we write, if fz is written as a xy plus I times b xy, okay, then a necessary condition for this function to be differentiable at z0 is that the Cauchy-Riemann equations hold at z0. Okay. Now what are Cauchy-Riemann equations? The Cauchy-Riemann equations are that derivative of a with respect to x be equal to derivative of b with respect to y, and that the derivative of a with respect to y is equal to minus of derivative of b with respect to x. This is also called the Cauchy-Riemann equations. Okay, so short form CR equations. These equations are very important because it is a necessary condition for this function fz to be differentiable at point z0. Consequently, if f is analytic in an open set G, then Cauchy-Riemann equations must hold at every point of G. So this is one way to test analyticity. So see what the difference that has come about is that we want to find out analyticity of fz, which means we want to know derivative of f with respect to z, the complex number. Cauchy-Riemann equations only deals with the real part of everything, right? So x, y, these are all real, a, b, these are real valued functions. So derivative of a by derivative of x, these are all real quantities that you can deal with. So the Cauchy-Riemann equation gives you a very simplistic method to check the analyticity of fz. Why is analyticity important? That hopefully I think that question should be come to your mind, right? This is going to be related to the Laplace equation or the solutions of that. Now we have already said that a real valued function phi xy is said to be harmonic in a domain D if all its second order partial derivatives are continuous in D, and if at each and every point of D, phi satisfies the Laplace's equation. So when phi, I think I have removed that. So if phi satisfies the Laplace's equation at every point in a given domain, it is called a harmonic. Now this this course is not a mathematics course, so we are not going into too much details of proofs or looking at very exact details of how these come about. Okay, so if you want to read mathematically pure statements, then I suggest that you take up a book like this. But for the most part, we will not be requiring very detailed understanding of all this. Okay, so some understanding of this is good. Now the important theorem that we have, which is what is relevant to us. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the statement of the theorem. So the theorem is, okay, we are obviously not going to prove it. So the theorem is that if fz equal to axy plus I times bxy is analytic in a domain D, then each of the functions, these two functions a and b, each of the functions a xy and b xy are harmonic in D, is harmonic in D. D being some domain. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is what we need from complex analysis, and what we are going to see, or what we are going to ask ourselves is that if we define f as a complex function as phi times I psi, then what is the nature of this function? To see that, what we have to do is, okay, so obviously this function can only be defined where both phi and psi exist. So this is obviously going to be a two-dimensional flow, and some of the other conditions related to phi and psi will have to be imposed. But right now, we'll ask that question in the next, so those things we'll clarify in the next class. Right now, you can just assume that we are describing a situation where both phi and psi exist. Okay, where phi is the potential function and psi is the stream function. So if you define a function like this, where we explicitly are saying that this is the potential function, and this is the stream function, what happens? Now let us look at this Cauchy-Riemann equation. Is something, see, this is a very interesting and simple piece of set of equations. So let us just see if that is valid in this case. So let us ask ourselves, del psi by del x, what is that equal to? That is equal to ux by definition, and this is also equal to del psi by del y, again by definition, right? We have done that before. And what happens to del psi by del y? Sorry, del phi by del y. This is equal to uy by definition, and this is equal to minus del psi by del x. Nice. Can you see this correspondence between this set of equations and this? So if you define a function like this, phi and psi automatically satisfy the Cauchy-Riemann conditions, and that means this fz is now analytic. there are other issues of continuity of the derivatives that I'm sort of skipping over, but those are also involved. Okay, so if you don't worry too much about those mathematically precise statements, we can easily see here that this function fz is now an analytic function. So we are going to use this idea and develop it a little bit further in the next classes. Okay, for this particular portion, I'll end it here.